Jila chanta tote mafuta e hakumai Jila chanta tote mafuta Jila chanta tote mafuta e hakumai Jila chanta tote mafuta
अब यो यहाँ म पार्किङमा जाँदैछु हैन सामान होटलसम्म बोकेर जानु पर्यो के उसको सामानहरु बोकेर ल
I am a professor here in the Netherlands, in Nijmegen, Radboud University. I teach Hinduism and Buddhism and two languages, the language Sanskrit and Hindi, so that's the ancient language of India, and modern Hindi, the modern language of India. Well, the main language which I studied during my studies at university in Utrecht and in Leiden is Sanskrit, then Hindi, and classical Tamil, that's the language of South India. I wrote my PhD on medieval Hindi, and for this I spent a long time in India. Sanskrit is a language that developed in a nomadic society. People were roaming around with cattle roaming around, and Indo-European. So there's still many unclear facts if it comes to Indo-European language, culture, all these kind of things. A very mixed and complex area. But it is clear that Sanskrit developed in a nomadic society, and nomadic implies people were roaming around with cattle. That was mainly the cows, goats at that time, and we must think of 4,500 BC, 3,000 BC. We're not so sure because
so maybe 4,000 years before.
Somewhere at that
Christ,
time, but
yeah.
we're not too sure.
Yeah.
The thing is also that nowadays in India they will always claim that Sanskrit developed in India itself.
Yeah.
And it's quite unclear because with Hindu nationalism this is all very important. Sanskrit cannot be of any foreign origin. It's impossible to think that way. But most probably those nomads slowly moved into India, and it is true in the 19th century the entrance of these Indo-Europeans was always described as big battles and wars, etc., and that's quite unlikely. Slowly they came with the cattle, like nomads roaming with the animals. And they came into India, and of course roaming around with your cattle, two things are very important. That's your relation to nature, which of course in India usually implies the monsoon, the rainy season, which must not be too violent, but also not too less, because if it's too much, your cattle perishes, the cows will die.
If there's too much rain, what do you mean?
Too much rain, the cattle will die. If it is
too dry,
then they will also die. So it must be in between. So for this reason, gods were worshipped that took care of nature. But a very other important aspect was that you find this very often amongst nomads. I've been many times to Mongolia, for instance. In Mongolia you'll find exactly the same thing, speaking truth. Your words must be trustworthy.
Why is that so important, speaking the truth?
If lying is allowed, someone comes to the place where you're dwelling with your cattle, and the person asks you, I want to bring my cattle to a place where the cows can drink. You send them the wrong way, then the person and the cows will perish, and that's not what you want. So that's vehemently punished if you transgress truth. So therefore, amongst nomads you will very often find that speaking is very restricted. I mean, Mongolians are very silent people, and if they speak it's always true. And you don't ever start a sentence with what do you do if this and this happens? No, because if you mention it in language, it will be there. It could be there, kind of magical thinking.
So the idea is that what you say is truth, is already happening, is something that it comes into existence because you say it.
You say it. I was once in Mongolia, and I was there with a group of tourists who took them around, and we were asked by a very rich farmer, a nomad, to enter his ger, his tent. and he had a lot of cows and camels, etc. And then one of the ladies asked him, what will you do if a cattle disease comes into being? And then the man said, please, my lady, life is tough the way it is. Don't talk about difficulties. And that's so nomadic. It's so nomadic. Life is tough the way it is. So we don't have to bring in extra problems. So amongst nomads, they will never understand why we like it so much to watch horror movies and complicated tragedies.
I don't understand that either.
Life is complicated just the way it is. So why other people's problems for entertainment? Nah, it's not a thing. Nah. So that's typically for people dwelling in cities. Then they like to learn from these kinds of tragedies, but not amongst nomads. Life is complicated the way it is. But Sanskrit, the Sanskrit language.
To the Gypsy language.
Yeah. Gypsies roamed around and left the Indian continent, ended up in Europe and in the West and also Central Asia. They were roaming the area, traveling, and whilst it had got to do with the cattle, the goats, the cows, the bulls, with which they were traveling around, and finding occupations everywhere, but they prefer not to settle down in cities, etc., but roaming around, because that's the way of living, that's the culture. And the language of the Gypsy languages are usually quite conservative, because of what you find amongst nomads, and therefore many words are still exactly the same like they were in Sanskrit. Very close.
So what do you mean by the language was conservative?
Nomads will always go the traces, the path of the forefathers. And the language is confronted with other languages, but then of course they integrate new words, but they stick to the old words. So the old words will remain the way they were. I mean, if we as Dutch go to South Africa, or to Suriname, the former Dutch colony, we hear Dutch words that we don't use anymore. And if you want to see the original 18th century Sinterklaas festival, you have to go to Siberia.
Oh yeah?
There's still a group celebrating it, at least.
18th century Sinterklaas.
18th century Sinterklaas, it's still celebrated there.
Wow.
I mean, I once saw a documentary about it.
Because they like the tradition. They like
tradition, so they are very conservative. That's what you very often find with the traditional languages as well. So they end up in another situation. Then in the heart, the original country, the language will change, etc. But they stick to these old words, to these old patterns, and therefore, some of the aspects of the Gypsy languages are very close to very old aspects of Indian languages. It's true. I mean, I cannot understand Gypsy languages on the basis of Sanskrit or Hindi or something, or Nepalese. That's not true. But if you look at morphology, what it looks like, how they originate, then of course you can see the connection, because it's there.
Jila chanta tote mofuta e hakmai Jila chanta tote mofuta. I forget.